So I'm here with my friend Mark Melnychuk, who is a reporter at Leader Post, and most importantly, just a huge nerd that likes writing about nerdy stuff and anything that kind of comes up. So welcome to my podcast here, Mark.
Thank you, Shay. I think this is only the second podcast I've ever been on.
So that's surprising because I know this is one thing I want to touch on, kind of what we talked about before about you guys doing a lot more online stuff. But you just seem like the kind of person that I could bring on and talk about so many subjects.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do. We do podcasts at work, and I listen to tons of podcasts. Like, I probably listen to like maybe 4 or 5 weekly ones every week. But I'm not on them a lot. I'm behind the scenes all the time.
Well, I definitely put your name forward for a couple. Just talking to someone who would be comfortable speaking to, like you write about a lot of stuff. Actually, well, that's a good question. What would you say that your specialty is for subjects you either get picked up on or you pick yourself?
Like I'd say I lean like obviously if anything to do with geek culture or gaming comes up, I'll do that. Like if it's writing about like say people who like Matt Ferrante or Royal 2 who's into Halo esports, like I'll always write about him. Uh when Fan Expo was in Regina, it's not here anymore, but I would cover that every year. That was a lot of fun to do. If it's people, if it's something, if it's Twitch streamers that happen to be from Saskatchewan or YouTubers, that type of thing. And then I also like reporting about the technology business. I haven't done it for a little bit because I'm doing management right now at the Leader Post, filling in for paternity leave. But Saskatchewan's got a pretty interesting burgeoning tech sector, and that's really interesting to write about. And then what else? I like writing about police accountability. Like I got the opportunity to that's totally different from geek culture, but like I had the opportunity to sit in on a police disciplinary hearing that happened that the government ran back in January. That was already ago. So yeah, I like writing to do with policing issues too sometimes. So that mostly covers and some business stories like writing about local business I think is pretty interesting,
So
so I think
all the
that about
nerdy
covers it.
geek stuff, is that like by process of elimination? Like we'll give the nerd on staff that stuff because a you'll know
uh
about it and they don't care.
yeah, I don't really have a lot of competition at the LP for writing about that stuff. Like there's certain subjects I find where a lot of journalists might really want to cover it, but like there isn't there isn't really anyone else on staff who like especially if it comes to writing about our local Halo esports guy. Like, I mean, I play all the Halo games and I watch him play, so like I'm totally willing to do that, like so there's just nobody who really probably would have an interest in, like, don't get me wrong, I think one thing that journalists have to be good at is jumping into subjects you're not familiar with, like, you know what I mean? Like there's been times where they've tapped me on the shoulder, be like, the premier's holding a press conference about, carbon taxes, and I'll be like, all right, you're up. Like I've got to reacquaint myself with the carbon tax a little bit more. So like that's kind of a thing in journalism. Like everybody has their own interest that they're drawn to and that they have, and obviously if you have an interest in it, you're going to be keen to learn about it. You'll probably be a good person to choose for writing about that. But you also have to, I think any journalist has to be versatile with being able to cover potentially anything. You never know what you might, like there's been times when I've had to go to court. There's been a couple trials I've covered, a couple, and those were two trials also involving police officers who were charged with assault. And the first couple times I got roped into going to court, like I was pretty stressed out because I wasn't familiar with it. And court can be an intimidating experience if you're not used to going to it. That's why we do have beats. Like we have a court reporter, so that person knows court like the back of their hand,
And they'd know them.
But yeah, but like you never know. There's times when the court reporter, there's been trials I've had to go. There was a couple of those trials I had to go to where the court reporter was busy with another trial that was happening, so I went to those ones. So occasionally you have to jump into stuff you might not be as comfortable with, but oh, another one that I like covering are death inquests. I find those really interesting. There's been death inquests that I've covered for people who have passed away at correctional centers or jails in the province. Anytime someone dies in custody in jail, there has to be a death inquest, where they call them a coroner's inquest, where they basically hold them to figure out the circumstances of someone's death. It's not meant to assign blame. It's not like a criminal trial. It's just figuring out what happened and trying to prevent something like that from happening in the future. So I find those really interesting to cover.
Yeah, the weirdest things that you find yourself becoming an expert in. Hey, I wanted to touch on one thing is that I really appreciate it. I'm a big gamer, and it's the culture that I have most of my hobbies in. But the one thing I liked about any of the stuff that you've written about the industry or esports or whatever, you actually know when you are reading someone else who or is just like probably just to sign that they don't care, they don't know anything about it. um a lot of times it like doesn't boil my blood, it just irks me a little bit. It's like you guys are getting it so wrong.
Yeah, no, that happens. I think that's becoming less of a problem in mainstream media because there's so many people like me who grew up with video games that are working those jobs now. And media's always, well, there's people of all ages, but there's a lot of young people in media these days working. And I think you get more and more people now who grew up playing video games and they're just not that ignorant of that world. Like, even if they're not like a huge hardcore gamer, they're probably familiar with games, like, so I think that's, but I know I grew up reading the same headlines you did over the time. And I remember this one time there was a news network on TV talking about the latest Call of Duty, and they started running footage of Halo, and I was just like, "How dare you!" In the newsroom.
And that's your like super villain origin of how you became a reporter, right?
That happened at work. That was when like Halo 5 came out or something,
Oh
I think.
geez.
And I was
Oh
just like, oh
really?
no. But I think it's getting better. Like, you have a lot of news outlets now, like Washington Post, or who else has done it? Bloomberg. Like, Bloomberg hired Jason Schreier, right?
Mm.
Who really understands video games.
Yeah.
He came from the games press and now works at a mainstream business outlet. So I think mainstream outlets are starting to realize, hey, this is a big business. We need to have coverage of this. If we want to have any chance of attracting readers who are younger than 50, we should understand video games. So I think the mainstream press has actually gotten better at covering video games than they used to.
Well, because you and I grew up with EGM and Nintendo Power, and then the closest thing to having like game coverage before YouTube was really a big thing was G4. Tech
Oh, I
TV, and
remember G4.
I
Yeah.
guess even before that, not really counting, but Video and Arcade Top 10, and that was the
I,
closest thing we had to watching video games. Or
I don't remember that one, but I was really big into Electric Playground with
oh
Tommy
yeah,
Tellerico and Victor Lucas. Like,
yeah,
I remember I actually got to meet. Weird story. I went to high school with Tommy Tellerico's cousin,
oh, okay,
and because he actually has Canadian connections. He has family in Ontario, but I remember finally through doing a little bit of video game journalism that I did like on the side, like getting to meet Tommy Tellerico and Victor Lucas, and I probably freaked them out with how excited I was to to meet them. But I remember but yeah, like, there wasn't that much. You kind of had like a few different sites you could go to. You had magazines you could read, but obviously that's a lot different now. There's a lot more choices for where you can go to get video game information.
yeah. I think that YouTube has really exploded in allowing people to see what video games are like and how they're played. Same with Twitch. A lot of people will they'll make their choices on what to buy based on like their own personal bias or what they like in a video game, regardless. But like watching someone play a game, you kind of make your opinion based on that rather than go watch a review or read a review.
I think it helps. I find where Twitch helps a lot is there's a lot of games these days. There's a lot of games. There's certain games, like certain genres where, like, I know I'll like it, so I'll buy it. Like, if it's a shooter, or if it's like, or if it's the type of games that developer makes, right? Like, like if it's Remedy and it's Control, like, oh, as long if I read a review, I'll go to, like, games are expensive, right? Like, I'll still go to, I still actually go to reviews to be like, all right, is this worth my money, or was it a flop? Like, but if it's a genre I'm not sure about, it helps to be able to just watch someone play it uninterrupted. Like, I just need to see someone play this thing so I can understand like what it is. But one way it's gotten, I find, that's helped me play genres I'm not sure about has been Game Pass. Like, it's like kind of the return of being able to rent games again. Like, I tried out like the Medium on Game Pass. Didn't end up being for me, but I was curious about it, and I got to try it for like the $12 a month or whatever it is to pay for Game Pass, right?
Yeah.
Like,
For
so
for
I
anyone who
find
doesn't
that's
know, it's like a Netflix for games exclusively on Microsoft, so the Xbox and the PC.
yeah, like that's been fantastic for that. There's been so many games and there's been tons of games I've tried on Game Pass and been like, yeah, that's not for me. I'm deleting it. But hey, like I didn't have to pay full price to figure out if I liked it or not,
I guess that's the closest thing to rentals since Blockbuster and Rogers shut down, right?
Yeah, that's something we really lost. Like we used to have days and people don't put out demos as much as they used to be anymore. That doesn't really seem to be a thing
Demos
anymore.
cost so much to make and manufacture because you're
Probably, yeah, but
basically programming in a whole new start to finish like game. You're designing a
yeah.
whole experience and packaging it into one.
Yeah, like I used to rent games from Blockbuster all the time. That was what I did. Like I remember renting a game like Full Spectrum Warrior, if
Mm-hmm.
anyone remembers that one on the original Xbox, thinking like this will be cool, and then playing it for 10 minutes and being like, I do not like this.
But
But
hey,
like
at least you
that
paid
was a
$10
great
for it, right?
yeah, that was a great service, and we've lost that a lot now. Like when a new game comes out, for the most time these days, it's like you can read reviews and you can use Twitch, but like at the end of the day, you've got to make that jump, right? Like, and you've just got to, or you just wait till it goes on sale,
Yeah.
right? Like,
I think the Twitch and YouTube thing is a good segue into what I wanted to talk to you about. So with COVID that's happened, we're in 2021 now. You guys reporting have had such a like huge shift, as a lot of people have, in how you operate and how you communicate to the general public. And one thing you were talking about is how you're getting people to do more meetings and video work. Can you talk about the trials and issues that you're running into with that?
I think we've adapted pretty well. Like we have lots of Teams calls now. Everybody, we used to have a few people on Slack in the newsroom. Now everybody's on Slack. Uh, and we used to have a podcast like the Rider Rumbling Sports podcast. We used to do in a studio with podcast equipment, and now we record it remotely. And then that's the other thing we do with our politics podcast too, inside the Marble Palace. So we've had to adapt to that. We still go out and take photos of people and go to breaking news, but like what you really don't have anymore is the idea of the press conference. They're all virtual press conferences now, right? Like nobody can say like, hey, let's get 30 people together in a room, like and the chief of police will give a press conference. Like we just can't do that right now. So that's been a big adjustment. And I think it was Wayne Mantika with CTV did a story on, is that something that's unfortunate that's happened is government is making people of I believe this is what he reported, that it's getting harder to access people in government because it's not like you go down to the ledge and it's after session or someone, you can just have someone come on down and talk to them, right? Like it's getting a little harder to interview government people, and a lot of times the government will be like, we're just going to give you a written statement, like you can't actually talk to the person or something like that. So that's kind of challenging. Like I don't same thing has been another real big problem has been reporting on court. Our court reporter has to phone in to court right now. And they haven't been, like, the court system is so backed up right now. They're not doing any jury trials right now. So I'm totally a firm believer in courts being open and available to the public so that reporters can observe the justice system take place, and then report that to the people. And that's been challenging, I'd say, for our reporters right now. So there's been challenges, but I think like we've still been able to report the news every day, so we've been able to adapt to it.
Yeah, well, I think it's easy to adapt with the tools that we have now. You were talking about Teams and Slack. A lot of stuff that we've been using for a little while, going back to NSN, we're used to instant messaging, and we understand like the value of it. But it's interesting to hear about all the issues, and so getting a hold of people and chatting with them, you almost have to like do an elevator pitch to get a hold of someone in the courtroom, and now you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, like, well, I think our court reporter is able to appear by phone, but it's not as good as being there in person. And I get, like, I'm totally understanding of COVID protocols and stuff like that. Like, but it is difficult. It's not too hard to get a hold of, like, I don't know, like it's been a little while since I was doing interviewing because I've been doing management for a bit, but like I wouldn't say it's any harder to get a hold of people just regular people than it used to be. But I I think like I said, it's just been a challenge. Like I miss the idea of having press conferences where everybody can go in there and everybody's allowed to ask their questions in person. It's definitely a lot easier to be evasive with reporters if it's not in person. It's
Mm-hmm.
real easy for if say an MLA or somebody doesn't want to talk to you about a story that maybe doesn't make them look good or make government look good. They just don't have to answer the phone. It's harder to ignore someone when they're standing in front of you with a microphone and not answer their questions, right? So I feel like that in person reporting and grilling of politicians and everything, like I feel like something's lost when we're not able to do that as much as we can.
Well, and you have to adjust your approach too. One thing I talk about with a lot of like, especially kids who are looking to get into any kind of workflow or workplace rather, is like what's the first thing? Well, get your communication down. Understand how to write an email, how to call someone, how to talk face to face, how to shake hands, and each one of those things is a very different thing that you have to do and approach. You can't write an email the same way you meet someone on the streets, and you can't obviously ask the questions in the same way when you said had a microphone in front of them versus writing out some email and getting a milquetoast just general response.
Yeah, I don't envy people getting into the workforce. Like I had to train someone who filled in for like my spot, and I had to do all like normally the training would have been us sitting down at a desk together and me being like, okay, here's how you do this, here's how you do this. I had to do everything remotely, like screen sharing, and it could be a little frustrating sometimes because there's times where it's like, man, if only I could just walk over to your computer. If they're like, this isn't working or something like that, I'd just be like, no, here's how you do it. But like, you got to do it like, I find what I keep doing too when I'm telling someone how to do something, I point at my screen even though they can't see it, and I'm like, "Why am I doing that?
Well,
I can't see it anyway."
if you look at getting this call started too, we ran into an issue where I sent the wrong invite out. You were logged into a different account. I recognized that immediately, and I knew how to rectify that and change it and fix it. Could you imagine the 20, 30-minute approach of just going back and forth? Oh, I think I'm signed into this account, and I don't know my password. And
I will say, like, we've already kind of heard this, and this is like being talked about a lot in the working world, and I think it's going to be true for us too. I think, like, it used to be they wouldn't really ever let you work from home. Like, you could request it if you wanted to stay at home for a day and work on a feature that you had to get done, but everybody was always pretty much in the office, other than like the sports guys who have to be at the game, to report on it. But like, I think they're going to be more accommodating to people now because you can totally, like, what's been proven in so many jobs is you can do the work from home. Like, it may not be quite as fast. In some cases, it maybe is just as fast, but like, yeah, I think a lot of more businesses will be accommodating to people if they're saying, hey, this week, like, I've got my kid at home, can I just work from home this week? Mm-hmm. Well, we've been doing it for a year. What's like one more week, right?
Well, they had the infrastructure prepared and done already. Because I know that was the biggest issue is like, oh, we don't want to put in the time or energy or resources to get all of this set up in a proper way where you can work from home. And now they've had no choice but to allow those accommodations.
Yeah, no, really, yeah. Like, and I think it's proven some employers, like, not mine, I'm not speaking for myself, mine's been pretty good with working from home. Like, they're not even in a rush to get us back to work. They're like, we'll get you to back to work when it's safe. Mm-hmm. That's the main thing, when it's safe, but I think this has proven, like, some employers have said, well, it wouldn't work, where people working from home, and this has totally proven that it has. Mm-hmm. Like, in some situations, I'm sure it's not as efficient, and there are things that suck, that, like, I mean, I do miss being in an office with people and having that camaraderie. One thing we do to kind of keep morale up is we have, like, coffee breaks at like 10:30 a.m. every other day, where it's just like 20 minutes where people can just shoot the shit for like a little bit, right?
And is that where you like go into like a common room, like you guys said?
Just go. There's a Teams chat for it, like, where people just go in and be like, "What have you been watching on Netflix?" Or something like that. The same kind of stuff we would talk about, like, over each other's desks at work, which is, I think, a nice thing to have, because we found that all anybody was talking about was business all the time. Whereas when you're in an office, there's always gonna be that water cooler talk of like, did you watch The Mandalorian this week or something like that?
That's actually really cool. Are there a lot of places doing that you know of, or?
I don't know. Like, someone just posited that idea. Like, we've been doing it for a while. like a few months into working from home, someone posited the idea about having virtual coffee breaks, and we've been doing it quite a lot.
Well, you need that social engagement just to get you kick started. I know that when I started working for myself, working from home, I run a small shop, so um, anyone who I've working for me is remote. We don't have an office, and like quite often, a lot of times, like I'll leave to go work somewhere else. I used to in the before times.
Yeah.
I'd leave to go work at a coffee shop or at Rebellion, or have some lunch meetings and face to face, and that kind of recharged that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I think one of oh, go on, yeah.
no, 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 yeah, we just don't have that anymore. And I guess in a big workplace like you have there, where you have those coffee breaks, that sounds awesome.
I think part of the challenge that companies have had is trying to maintain culture, right? Like it's easy to have an office culture. What do you do when that culture has to all be online, right? Uh, so I think that's something we've tried. Like I think we've maintained it. Like it doesn't feel like it still feels like I work for the same place now. I just do it from home right now.
Yeah.
But I honestly, like, if I had the choice, I'd go back to the office. Like when we're all vaccinated and everything like that, and the time comes to go back, like I miss seeing people in person,
Would you
you
go
know?
back full time, or is that something where you're going to try to go for a full and part?
I think I'd be fine going back full time because I honestly kind of always preferred having my home life separate from my work life. Like it's kind of weird how my I don't know what you call this room that I'm in, our computer room, storage room, become an office. Like usually, and when I get up, when I'm done work for the day, I don't want to be in this room anymore. I'm like, I got to get out of here. Like. So I kind of prefer. I've always preferred being at it. Like that's just me. I think some people probably like it. Really depends on the person, right? Like it is good for when you have to concentrate. Like there can be times in your office where people are being loud or
Yeah.
something like that, and there's distractions, and you're like, oh, I just need to get this done. But I kind of miss being able to. I think there were so many times with my boss where when we were discussing video ideas, like idea generation, and being able to like we have to react so quickly a lot of the times at our job. Like I remember there'd be times during like the refinery lockout where the one reporter who does a lot of labor reporting for us was like, "Hey, Alex running down to the line." My boss would just I would spin around my chair and be like, "Hey, he's heading down to the line. There's some new development. Like, should I go with him for video?" Yeah, go. Like, hop in the car with him. Like I miss that, right? Like that's the part of the fun thing with journalism is getting to leave the office and go to interesting things. Like getting to getting to be there for interesting things.
Yeah.
Like I really do miss that. I miss you don't really get a lot of as much event journalism anymore because nobody can hold any events. Like I can't imagine the day the amount of coverage we're going to pour into the first Rough Rider game after the pandemic. Like interviewing that's going to be an all hands on
It's
deck
going to be a
thing.
week
Like
long event.
oh god, probably like just interviewing all the people going back into the stands and everything like that. Like it's getting to the point where that is more and more by the week you see those vaccine numbers going up palpable to talk about, like,
Mhm.
or to think about, like, hey, this might actually happen,
And
like,
everyone's getting
in
excited
the
to
next
do
year.
it, and it's good timing. Yeah, we've been doing pretty well with what we like. We got stuck in the arm this weekend, so we're happy to finally get that. And my nephew's even going right away, like my 16-year-old nephew. So that like was a huge jump. They're just opening everything up. We got come get your vaccines and
Yeah, no, it feels like I think it was easier to feel. I still remember going, I still remember Googling at some point last year, when will the vaccines be out? And getting articles where it's like, I don't know, like maybe sometime next year, we don't
well,
know.
so my
And
birthday's
now
in
it's like, I've got it.
my birthday's in March, and I went to go pick up some stuff for my pharmacist. And he knows me, good guy. Actually, I was thinking about having him on the show. Um, and I'm talking like, oh yeah, no, how long do you think this is gonna last? Where they just started locking things down right before my birthday,
Oh yeah.
and I'm like, oh, well, how long is this gonna go? Like, a couple of months. And he like looks over at the other pharmacist and looks back at me. He's like, no, buddy, this is like a year out at least. And it was.
And it really is just a miracle of modern science that a year after a brand new virus comes out that human history has never seen, I have a vaccine in my body now. Like it's wild to think about,
Well, there's
like
so many choices for vaccines too. Well, choices, in that there are multiple.
yeah, like well,
Go get
not that
what you
there's
get.
just no, you're right though. There isn't even just one vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
There's several vaccines out. Like it's amazing, and it feels. I think it's easier to feel a lot more positive these days than like the drudges of like some of 2020 when you would just be like, there's no end in sight. Where now we have like a light at the end of the tunnel now, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing results happen now, right? Or like, and we're a little ways off still. Like, you got to be careful right now because we're not totally done yet. But
Yeah.
like, it's weird how fast it's coming together. Like, you look at the schedule they're putting out, and it's like, I can go get my second dose in like June, and then I'm done. Like I've thought about making plans to go see my family in like this fall. Like that's bonkers that I'm potentially being able to do that, right?
Yeah, it's great. Like I'm glad things are opening up, and it's despite a little bit of resistance, which we'll not speak of right now because I don't want to get into that whole rigmarole. But I'm happy the way things are going.
I think my personal pet theory is that how they had the 1920s were the roaring 20s. Like I think once we're past COVID, it's going to be another roaring 20s.
You think
Like
so?
people are going to be I think people are going to be so pent up for events and concerts and conventions, like gaming conventions or PAX and stuff like that. Like I think 2021's probably not 2021 probably won't be the year. Like E3 is not even going to be like in person this year, but like 2022, I think, this is just me armchair analysis, but I think we'll probably have more events. And then finally, people will be like, we've already seen, like, my wife has told me, like, at the one bar near where she works, people are just cramming that patio. I mean,
Mm,
hopefully, like, spaced out, but like,
yeah.
I think there's a big appetite to go back to normal for people. And once all the vaccines are out there, like, I think like you just think of how long it's been since people have been able to travel. Even like it's probably going to be hard to get plane tickets.
They're not used
Like
to being
once
like vampires like us, where we just like abhor the sun and stay inside playing games all day.
No, and I think I've been able to. My wife and I kind of describe ourselves as indoor cats. Like I think I've been able to weather this a lot better than some people. Like people that I know who are travel junkies and party animals. Like it's been killer for them.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like, all right, I'm going to stay home and play video games and
Yeah.
read. I was going to do that anyways. Like I can handle it. I'll go for a walk to get my share of sunlight, and then I'm going to go back into my room, like
Yeah.
so if you're an introvert, I think the pandemic's been a little easier to handle. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Before I let you go, I did want to talk to you about like I really enjoy your Twitter, and it's not just your Twitter. A lot of
Somebody enjoys it at least.
well, and we'll get to that point in a little bit, but like I always find journalists and people in media and how they interact with their Twitter very very interesting. And like obviously you have to kind of hold back some punches because it is you're a public figure, but I know that especially in journalism, you want to try to be as honest and forefront as possible. So, like, I'd like you to tell me just a little bit about like what your thought process is when you're crafting a tweet or when you're ready to engage on social with anyone who you're responding to.
Well, I guess it depends. I mean, for one, I have two Twitter accounts. Like I have a work one and a personal one, because my personal one is mainly just filled like it's a lot of observations about life or whatever, but I also just tweet a lot about like video games and movies and books that I'm reading. And the audience for news is a total different audience. There are some people who follow both of them that I know, but like you definitely have to be careful with what you say when you're a journalist. Like on my personal one, I won't really give any opinions on what I think of Scott Moe or Justin Trudeau or whatever. Like
What do
I'm
you
not
think
going
of
to
Scott Moe
share
and Justin
anything like
Trudeau?
that.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not going to say no comment, which is weird, which is ironic coming from me. Like, but yeah, like I mean, I try to always be. I think everybody should probably be tweet responsibly. Like you never know like what might come back to bite you, but journalists I think have to be a little bit more careful. So it's kind of just second nature to me already that I won't comment on politics. But I can let loose with like, I think this new video game is crap. Like my boss isn't going to come to me and be like, oh, you got to take that down or something like that. And then the journalism one, you might get people trying to be combative with you sometimes, or really disagreeing with you, or someone who's hostile towards media. And I just don't respond to those because there's nothing to be had with. like if someone has a question or something like that, I try to always reply to people on Twitter, like no matter what. Like I feel like if someone tweets something at me, I should probably reply to them, unless it's like I think an anti-vaxxer tweeted something at me a while ago, and I just didn't respond. I was like, I'm not like. I think the thing is taking. I think the best way I think someone at CBC put it to me one time was taking the higher road. Like, don't sink to someone's level if they're just trying to troll you or something like that. So yeah, that's kind of
I
how I
can't speak
handle
from
it.
experience, but I feel like you would be a prime target of someone who like they would just want to be like, yeah, I got to get this guy going, so then I could come back at him and go in for blood after I kind of smell it. Do you think that's probably what they're doing? Is they're trying to just get you going?
I don't know what goes on with people who do that as a pastime. Like, I guess, like, I should clarify that as, like, a white cis man, the amount of hate I get on the internet is barely anything compared to, like, a lot of female journalists I know. The amount of crap they have
Oh
to deal
God,
with
yeah,
is just terrible, right? Whereas, like, I can probably count on my hand, like, the amount of time someone's been mean to me on my work Twitter account because of something I tweeted. Like, where, like, I really don't get that much abuse, but I also, like, there's some privilege that comes with that for just being who I am, right?
yeah.
Like, so I'm totally cognizant of that. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, definitely people who are a little more out there, like say Murray Mandrick or Rob Vanstone, the two columnists we employ, have people try to get under their skin a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
probably more than I do. But that's just it is what it is. That's the internet. There's going to be people who make anonymous accounts and try to. And I one rule I do have is I will block the odd person if they're just being a jerk on my personal one. I don't think I've ever blocked anyone on my work one, even if they're mean to me. I'll let them because it's a work account, right?
Yeah,
Like and I want them to, even if they say something mean to me, I still want them to see the information I'm putting out.
yeah.
Like, even if they don't like me, I'd like them to be informed. So as a rule, I don't, unless they'd have to be, I haven't had to do it yet. They'd have to be pretty bad for me to block them on my work one, but I don't block anybody on my work one. I had to do it pretty rarely on my personal one. There's been the odd time where I've blocked someone because I'm just like, I don't want. It's weird. Like sometimes I find it's always funny when like I'll tweet something about video games and someone I don't know must be just searching that term and they'll be like, "You're wrong. Like this is why you're wrong. And you
Well,
suck." And I'm just like, "You don't even know me."
that's just the video game culture, right? Is they're just ready to hop on anything.
And
Talk
I'm
about
just like,
people
"You
who
don't
do that
even."
as a hobby.
Those people I block because I'm just like, it's some dude with an anime profile and he's just got some weird username, and I'm just like, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah,
Like, I'm much less hesitant to ever block someone if they're from Regina.
yeah.
Like, I'm like, you're a human being,
It's the
right?
same
But
with,
if there's
with
some,
my LinkedIn, stuff. If there's anyone I don't recognize them personally or like working with them from anything or they're from a different country, I'm like, yeah, no, that's you're
yeah,
not in
but
my circle.
I've blocked hostile people before who have gotten mad at me about video game opinions, and I'm just like, I don't have time for you. Like, I don't care.
Well, no, I encourage anyone listening or watching to follow Mark and check out stuff that he's doing at the Leader Post. But kind of before I let you go, do you want to plug anything? You want to talk about anything exciting that you got going on? This is all of you right now, man.
Well, like because I'm kind of behind the scenes, maybe I'll I mean, you can follow me. My personal Twitter's. You think you've got it on your screen, but for maybe people who are listening, it's Melnychuk86, and my name is spelled Melnychuk. You can always just Google my name too, and it'll
I'll
probably
put
come
it
up.
in the description of everywhere I'm
Yeah,
posting this.
and then M Melnychuk LP is my work one. I'm looking forward to covering Matt Fiorante and Halo when Halo esports get started again, whenever Halo Infinite finally comes out. So like I'm sure I'll be covering that. Like I'm looking forward to writing the article on him. He's had a very long off season, I guess. But I'm not putting out a ton of content right now. So I mean, just follow. People can follow the Leader Post on Facebook and Twitter, and we have two podcasts. The Rider Rumblings podcast we're not putting out as much anymore just because the CFL is not playing right now, so that one's a little more periodic. But the Inside the Marble Palace podcast that we put out with Murray Mandrick, Arthur White Crummy, and various journalistic guests is out there on. It's not on all the podcast platforms yet because we're doing a bunch of internal tech changes, so it's not on like all the regular podcast platforms, but it is on YouTube right now. So people could check that out. But yeah, like I don't have a ton of because of I'm managing more right now. I'm getting back to writing. I'll be getting back to writing in August. So I'm looking forward to covering like the tech scene again, and any kind of nerd culture stuff that comes up. I won't turn down the opportunity to cover, and then hopefully maybe if we have like geek conventions again, I really hope those come back after the pandemic.
Well, if they come back, like I'll see you there, man, for sure.
Yeah, those will be fun.
I'm happy to go out, and it'll be good to actually go grab a beer and lunch sometime. And but this is nice you able to actually take time out. This is even after hours too, of sitting down and chatting with me. So just again, man, thanks. We appreciate you coming on and letting us know what's going down.
Thank you.